Well, it's 5 o'clock and a quorum is present, so I will call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda, watch this everybody, because I'm gonna get it right for the first time, is the approval of today's agenda. I always confuse it with the minutes from the last meeting, but, so the first item is the approval of the agenda for today's meeting. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
And a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None opposed, so. Next, we'll call for a public discussion. Are there members of the public who would like to address the board present? Okay.
You're our boss.
Hi, there we go. Yeah, we got public comment. Yeah.
That's exactly what you're
That's
supposed
perfect.
to do.
Perfect, yeah. Okay, so moving on to item 4, the items that we discussed. Start with 4A, which is the proposed budget for FY25. Ellsworth, would you like to?
Yes, so we're at the point of the budget process where we enter our proposed budget for fiscal year 25. And we were asked at the budget kickoff meeting to really mirror last year's expenditures. I shouldn't frame it that way, to keep new service requests and new staffing requests to a minimum. As I outlined in the memo, I am responding to that, but that doesn't mean that we don't need more resources to maintain service levels, especially in the areas that I kind of pulled out. So we did present this a little bit differently than we have in the past. I included the CIP project sheets, which I'm happy to talk about. As I noted in the memo, the 2 new requests were cut in the first round, as were many other CIP requests from other departments. I do think that's an area where there's some tightening up as the city tried to figure out what to do with some different budget parameters. Then we also gave a full budget request report. So that's the Munis report, the detailed lines. Some of them are more self-explanatory than others, that gave you the current year's budget and the amount that we requested, and then indicates the percent change. And after that report, we included the budget in brief, which is what has traditionally been shared at this board meeting. Just kind of looking back at the questions that have been asked over the years about the budget in brief, Jen and I thought it would be worth adding the Munis report to see how that felt to the group, and if that we can talk now or later about whether that's useful or not. I know it's a lot of information, and will be more comfortable to some than others as far as navigating just the general budget documents. The leadership team is, intimately familiar with what these requests are for and what we plan to do with them and all of that. So if you have questions, we're happy to walk through any of it.
I guess I'll start. In the summary that you wrote there, Ellsworth, on page 5, the budget request summary, where it says, the sentence that goes, moving some funding from hourly personnel lines to permanent part-time. What does that really mean? Because are you going part-time to part-time, or, I mean?
That's a great question. So right now, that's in reference to the position that 40% of it is covered from the gift funds. So we have some personal money in hourly lines that we think could be better utilized, moving that into the operational fund. So it wouldn't be changing the resource allocated, but we have to go through a process to move things from the hourly line to the permanent line. They're just 2 different spots in the budget. And that's what we requested as part of the budget process, is taking this value and moving it from one spot to another.
So I was also interested in that. Does that take all of the staff salary out of Nobu, or what's left?
So that would take the position that we're talking about here is the children's
Slash
bookmobile
yeah.
position. That would move that position 100% into the operating
Right.
budget. It would leave half of a development office position.
Oh, right.
Which I think has been a longer
Yeah.
standing piece of that budget. And that one feels more, a little bit logical.
Yeah, it seems like a reasonable place
For a long
for
term.
that, yeah.
I do plan if this request, if the city has questions or wants to talk about other options, we could look at a more staggered approach, but it felt like while we could make the offer of we have resources, we just want to shift where they're coming. It felt like it would have an immediate return of usable funds in the.
These are tough years to offer a staggered approach. So I think you should try to avoid that.
I agree. We're gonna,
It's not gonna get better next year.
I agree, and another option would be to just straight up ask for the resources as new resources. That doesn't feel like the current budget climate. I don't
Right,
feel like that's gonna be
right.
successful, so
I like this approach.
I'm comfortable with it. It's not my preference, but I think again, it would have that immediate impact of
Right.
freeing up that almost 20% of the NOVA budget back into play, which would be allow us to take care of some things.
And to get the staff truly in our
Yes.
budgets,
Yep.
both
Yes.
to preserve NOVA, but also get the staff in the right place.
Absolutely.
That's great.
What does the column division signify?
That's a good question. Division is the library as a department. So this is the divisional request. It's the request that the library is making that goes into the city's budget. It just sort of indicates so as the process goes on, more of those fields get filled in. So at one point, there'll be the divisional request, which is what we asked for, and then council, I think it will be the next one to be filled in. That's what the city council approves.
Approves, I see. Okay.
So we hope that they're the same, but
Yeah, and so projected actual is less than that in many, some cases, maybe not many, but some cases. Is that correct? Projected actual is what you think is going to be the cost.
that's what is being projected for actual costs for the current fiscal year. So
Oh,
there's the current adjusted, that's this year's budget. The projected actual is the projected actual expense under that line, which I'm not entirely sure how they calculate that for personnel. I'm assuming they work in the step increases and those things that are behind the scenes there. And then the division is what we've asked for next year. And then the percent change is between the current budget and the request for next year.
right, right.
Temporary, you've heard me talk about this before, so this always somewhat bothers me, but like, it looks like you're not projecting it different from one year to the next, I guess. 65,000 different from FY 23. I get that, but our temporary workers, they don't receive benefits, right?
Correct.
And they wouldn't be union contract
Yes,
folks. Okay,
correct.
all right.
And temporary is like the technical term that's used by the city HR. I don't think
Yeah.
anybody loves it, but
I know
that's
that's
what-
a semantic thing. Maybe I just.
Yeah.
yeah, internally, we typically say hourly, but obviously temporary is what's codified in the documents.
There's this is on page 11. And it's cell phone and data services in which there's no current budget. There's a projected cost of $4,500. And then no request for more or even the same amount in the next fiscal year.
Did we move a line there,
That
Jen?
used to be out of the admin budget and moved it into the IT budget, so that's why there is a number from 1 year to the next. It just moved to a different department, but the numbers, I think, stayed pretty similar.
We moved it from a different budget line. As you noticed, I'm sure there are lots of duplicate lines by department.
Right.
So I think we moved that from admin to IT. So it'll show up in a different place. It just doesn't match. there.
Okay, all right.
Any other questions or comments for Ellsworth?
And our division meeting with city budget, city administration is November 2nd. So we'll have more information at that point.
Is that just discussion then? And they might guide you a little bit.
Yeah, it's almost a line by line walkthrough,
Okay.
depending on sort of what's been requested and what new information they might have to share with us. Lots of questions, just like this group has, sort of like, tell me more about this paper products line and it's great. Actually, every year we do it. I think both sides of the table learn more about the operations and the process. So I'm looking forward to it. Obviously, one big part of this year's discussion will be learning more about what the city's thinking about the levy allocations, and we'll report back on what we hear.
I was just looking at the heating and cooling. We're seeing a projected actual right on the line, but it looks like a big jump for next year, which seems appropriate, but are you seeing the rise in utilities costs?
We have been seeing a rise, and typically what we do if there's an overage that we can balance. So if the electrical is higher than what we budgeted for, we'll balance that within that departmental line, or that departmental budget. So sometimes at the end of the year, it looks like we hit the exact number, but we spent more out of another line.
Sure.
So that sometimes there's not like a super clear correlation of why are you asking for more. In the budget report that goes to the city, there's pretty detailed notes that we add in the fields that where we might say, this was balanced with 336,140 because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that's probably why they continue to do the in-person department meetings, is because everybody has those things that we do our very best to keep the bottom line clean by finding the pairs we can put together.
So your ask is closer to what you're balancing out
Mhm.
versus what the line item is showing.
Exactly.
Sure.
Like I said, today I'm excited about the vending machine.
Yeah, which isn't happening.
I know,
It's a neat idea.
I think that we can talk about other ways that could take form too.
Seems like that should fall in line with the city's DEI goals.
I agree.
There's like grant money. City.
Yes, and I think that there may also be grant money available to the partners that we'd be working with that I think we can formulate sort of a plan of what could we explore. And I think it's also a place where the Friends Foundation may want to support some of the costs. It's a very visible, would be a very visible sort of new service, and the benefit would be immediate in that there would be materials available, but it would also give us some more data about use in those areas, both materials being returned and also being accessed. Some machines also let you incorporate holds pickup, which would be yet another data point. All of that sort of helping us understand longer term, what are the needs for services in different parts of the community.
Been a long time since I've looked at those. Is there one, I know there's a huge initial cost. Isn't there like a continuing regular cost associated with it too? I feel like I looked at this years ago and I'm sure it's different now, but
Yeah, I had a chance to meet with a couple of vendors at ALA in Chicago, and the last time I looked at it seriously was at a different library, maybe 8 years ago, and I think that they've really been improved as equipment. It sounded like if it was in a covered environment, or it's not like out in the elements, that there would be, they could sort of help you future cast what the expenses would be. I think that our facilities team would have the ability to do many of the maintenance pieces that I think some places would have to have a contractor come in and do. But each vendor I talked to did sort of have a breakdown of what the expected ongoing costs would be. For us, the biggest hurdle beyond the initial cost would be the staff hours.
Right.
And I think we could manage some of it with outreach staff who are already in the community with materials and doing that work. But because of the volume that comes in, we have to empty book returns daily, year round. And so adding more of those would require facilities resources.
Anything else on the FY 25 budget request? Good questions that we should the eagle eyes. Picking things out there.
I'm always curious about what people pick out. It's
Yeah.
like always coming into these meetings, like, what are people gonna be
Yeah,
on
what-
to today? Cause it's
Yeah.
never what I think.
Yeah, well, that's why there's multiple.
And I love your call out on the vending machine too, because it's like, think of the overworked population,
Right.
how much that's going to.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of curious about the long-term costs, because you can get grants to cover initial costs. But you
Yeah.
can't always, but you can't get a grant necessarily to cover your maintenance or upkeep or, yeah, it was prohibitive for us at a library I worked at a long time ago. Like, we could get the grant and get the machine, but it was not gonna be a long-term solution for that before, but it sounds like probably streamlined machines too, like that was years ago, so I'm sure the devices have changed a little bit.
All right, so this request requires board approval. Do I have a motion to approve? Move, DJ move, seconded by Robin. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes. And we move on to talking about first quarter expenditures from current budget year. I just wanted to say, as I was looking at this, and the way you presented it, also it crystallized something for me. So as we just did, we approve a budget request. And then our next responsibility is to monitor how that budget is being maintained, adherence to that. And so for some purposes, it's really useful to look at compared to this time last year. But for our purposes in monitoring the budget, the real question is how close is it to what was budgeted? And so I really found this table just super helpful. It's, these are the things that are weird by enough to matter. And some of them will always be on here because you'll make the expenditure at the beginning of the year or not until the end of the year. And so that line will always be looking off. The real interesting ones are the ones that don't have a simple explanation like that. So anyway, with that introduction, I don't know if Ellsworth, you have anything to.
The only thing I would just say is I did change the parameters a little bit because it's first quarter. If I used the standing percentages that I used the rest of the year, there would have been, I think, one thing on the list. So
Yeah.
I did expand it a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think it's such human nature to look down the list and really want to talk about the ones that are, why is that 300% spent, but it's a $75 line.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't,
Yeah.
it's every dollar obviously matters and we have an explicit trail of where it went. But I think in the context of this conversation, it's the bigger chunks that really matter.
Yeah.
And
The bigger the bigger story here is just how transparent this is. The amount of itemizations here is fantastic, and we owe that to everyone, so. I adore it.
One of the things I was impressed by was just that for the first quarter anyway, and of course, quarters change. You'll have good quarters, bad quarters. And hopefully you hope it all shakes out at the end, 100% plan. But this for the first quarter anyway, you look at these and how it looks like there's a lot of vigilance here in keeping to this budget. Because if you look at the last item, which is your grand total, and you look at the column that would be percent used, how much has been, what part of the,
Yeah.
how much of the budget's been spent. You know, if we're at 23% for the first quarter, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, if it was 25%, it'd be good.
Right.
You know, so, I mean, or even 27.
Right.
So I thought this was impressive.
Right.
Impressive, and kudos to the staff.
Yes.
I think that every time we see one of these quarterly, because they're almost always right on
Tracking.
target.
It's,
And I guess it speaks to the sort of fortunate circumstance that we have enough beginning of the year and end of the year bulk expenses that
Right,
they
even
they
so.
balance out. nicely.
yes. And the leadership team are across the board excellent at managing the departmental expenses, which include some really big budget lines. I mean, this is juggling complex pieces and they really do a great job.
Any other? Yes, anything in this report? It's a really long scroll.
Yeah.
Back to the. Yeah.
There were two things in the statistics that were errors. One very minor, the other one fixable. On page 41 of the packet, in the fiscal year 24 circulation by type and format, there was just a header that didn't get changed at the top. It says 15 months. That's because we forgot to reset it for this fiscal year, so it's really 3 months. I think probably people's brains just made that change automatically. And then there was also a transfer here. On page 50 of the packet, at the very top section, information services, bookmobile reference questions are listed in 0.
I keep looking at that one thinking, what was that?
Yeah, so that real number is 422. It was just a disconnection of the import from a different spreadsheet. That would be a 106% increase. So just did that error. We'll have it fixed on the next one.
That one I did notice and wonder, is everyone just being, no one has questions or?
Anything else that people noticed, wanted to ask about or remark upon? We circulate a ton of material. It just strikes me every quarter. It's just, look at all that material that people have access to.
It's wonderful that attendance. I like to have attendance like that at any of my previous places.
Yeah,
It's great.
okay. The next item on the agenda 4C is a policy review for policy 804. And I think the only change there is we distributed points of service instead of specifying some children, basically just change.
Easy.
Any questions about that policy? Is it straightforward to administer? I mean, there's some discretion about what gets distributed, allowed in the policy. Does it get hard ever?
I would say it gets hard because library staff, we don't want to say no. When
Right.
somebody has something that they want to distribute, but I think there's a good understanding of this, and there's also good oversight of the physical spaces, so when there are rogue, drop-offs of material, they're usually, noticed pretty quickly, and then we can take care of it. I think this is one of those, like sleeper services that can actually be really powerful in the community, so I'm glad that we have a policy around it that lets us kind of control what happens with it. But as far as I know, the policy works pretty well. And Sam is unexpectedly out tonight, but did not give me any specific other notes besides the memo.
Any other questions or discussion?
I'm just curious what materials you're gonna squeeze into the bike. It has a little pamphlet holder on the top there.
It does.
Just curious.
Well, we have great aspirations for what we're gonna
Yeah.
fit there.
I'm curious. It's gonna be, I'm
Yes.
sure.
So I guess I'll look for a motion to approve the revisions to policy 804, free materials distribution. Second motion and a second. And any discussion? I say that in student council, we weren't allowed to discuss anything until there's a motion on the floor. We do it the other way around. So that's why I have the habit of asking for a discussion after we've actually had all our discussion. So all in favor of approving? Any opposed? Okay. And the next item on the agenda is discussion of an advocacy committee. This is something that Robin asked to have on the agenda. So Robin.
With the constraints that are coming fiscally and some of the challenges to libraries, I'd like us to be able to respond more efficiently, more quickly. So I am asking us to consider first either starting a advocacy committee. So there are some people here who are very experienced at writing letters for us, but it be formalized more. And the second is it's very connected to the financial constraints that are coming along, both on the state level and then nationally. This could be one committee together with advocacy and finance, or it could be two separate functions depending how we see their use. I can't think of something that's more important to this board right now than these two issues. This is going to change our operation significantly unless we get ahead of it. So I don't know if there are others that, I mean, when we say put a committee together, that means it would take human effort. People have to agree to take on the tasks, and I don't know if people are sharing the interest in. I'm not advocating that they meet monthly, but I think an advocacy committee needs to be nimble and be able to respond quickly. The financial may need to be nimble, but also maybe quarterly meetings will be all it needs to monitor the real operations. At some point, we're going to have to be putting together a strategy of how we're going to address the budget shortfalls that are coming. People think this is stable. I think you might be naive.
Are you recommending that the subcommittee then prepare a direction for?
I think to be working with the director on strategies of how we'll respond, or else how we at least make the governing bodies aware of what's going to be coming and how this will affect our service model. I don't think it's for the director only to take on. I think it's for the board to be saying, be aware, we will have service limitations. If the cuts that we're anticipating come down, we may not be open 7 days a week. We have to seriously look at what's going to do to our staffing model. But I think getting ahead of it would be beneficial compared to reacting once the cuts come. And also by having a committee that can do some planning, it's a chance to unite with the other libraries in the area. They're going to be affected and maybe have some strength here in numbers when we're speaking to the community.
One thing I like about the idea that you mentioned briefly is that we have over the last years had times when we wanted to take a public stand, and it's cumbersome. If we had an advocacy committee who could prepare a document in advance of a meeting, we could do it in one meeting.
Yes, and not have the extra meetings to agree on it. I think so too. And I think the advocacy committee could have more continuity in following some of these issues and seeing what's coming. But I think it would allow us to to accept or sign on to a statement
Right.
when it first comes to the board.
Right.
I feel like I'm the doom and gloom person, but I think
Yeah.
we're coming up against a few really hard years fiscally and politically.
Yeah.
And we need to be aware of this. I like the idea. I think we should do it. But anyone says they like it, has to kind of like.
I know, well, that's what mine, that, you didn't wait for the but. I did upgrade that with the mid now, because I really like it, and I'm. I think it's excellent, but also I'm.
But also you're.
I think you've demonstrated real ability to write these.
But I think you
letters.
indeed
Also,
are
I'm gonna be
exceptional at
awesome.
writing statements for the boards to
Yeah.
consider, and the fact that this could be done in advance rather than saying, okay, we
Yeah.
talked about here.
My first impulse is to jump right on it, and then I'm also thinking of what realistically time I can offer, and so. Otherwise, I'd be already volunteering, because it's important to me as well. I'm
Yeah.
already feeling the impacts.
But also, you know the heartbeat of what's happening. You're one of the people
Already am
who's
feeling
so
the
involved in
impacts.
this, that you see what's coming.
Mm.
So one thing, in forming a committee, I kind of like to have a document that defines the scope of the activities of that committee
Mhm.
before people start volunteering.
Mhm.
So maybe in the next month, I'd be happy to work with you,
That
Robin,
sounds
on a
At least
proposed,
a statement
yeah,
of a mission.
proposed definition of what
Yeah.
the committee does.
Yeah.
And then we could approve that and solicit.
And maybe we
volunteers
could
next
work
time.
it, I don't know if the finance committee actually has a mission statement that way. I think in the past it was simply familiarize and
Yeah.
communicate the current stand. But when I'm thinking about the finance committee looking ahead, I think, or strengthening the finance committee, I think of it in terms of looking ahead also. So it's not just being familiar with our reports.
Right, right. Well, let's you and I figure out whether, we combine those functions.
And is there anyone else that'd like to work on this? Don't, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be
Yeah.
just. Geez,
You wanna work on
yeah,
it?
I think it's a great
Okay.
idea.
Okay,
Might
well,
come
I'll
up
get
with
us,
the future.
I'll get us together to.
We have to watch we can't put everyone on this part because we have to watch the open meetings law. Too many of us.
It's three
Get in a
people. We have
conversation,
3 people, I believe.
Three's
Yeah.
fine.
Three
But just to
We
write the
could,
statement.
we could go for.
Oh, okay.
I wondered if other systems were putting together a similar thing, and if so, would it
Yeah,
be useful to connect?
yes.
I just
We'll
went down to talk to the libraries and the other libraries that had the larger levies.
Mhm.
Because I think those two groups might have.
Okay,
Mhm. So we'll wait to hear from you,
Yeah,
just to make sure we're clear at the end of.
and maybe I'll wait to
Who's
hear
waiting to
from
hear
you.
I can wait till tomorrow, yeah.
No, I would feel like this would be something Sam would be excited about.
She is.
So,
She is. She's aware of
sounds
it.
like something that I would be happy to, or interested in hearing about.
Yeah, so we'll bring a proposal and then, frankly, we'll call for volunteers. If there are 0, then we'll take that to mean that the board doesn't want to do this, but there will be.
If you're thinking you want to volunteer, but the task looks big, I mean, communicate that to it. It doesn't have to be an on or off. It has to be, this is what I can honestly offer
Yeah.
you.
right.
Yeah.
Can we adjust the task?
And we might,
It's too big.
yeah, and we might have a charter for the committee and someone might say, look, I can do this part, but not that
Right,
part.
right.
That's fine.
I think that would be extremely
So
helpful.
how does it work with the number of people? So if the committee, and is the committee then limited to
Yeah.
4 people as well?
We'll
Okay.
double check that, but it's, yeah,
And otherwise it has to be an open meeting.
right.
Okay.
Which I think we don't want to do that.
But you've had the
Probably
expertise
not.
to really lead quite a bit of our
Well,
action.
I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm struggling.
You wanna-
already.
No, no, right,
So
and
I
I'm not
don't
trying to
wanna
draft
add a
you, I'm not
ton.
trying to draft you, I'm
I'm
just
like,
saying,
yes,
you
I
have,
would
you
love
have
to
unique
be,
skills here.
Yeah, I would love to be involved. I just don't want to do it a disservice by not having the time to give it the attention it deserves is where I'm at.
Yeah.
I
Very
guess, let me
responsible.
say that gracefully.
It's a very responsible position.
I would recommend creative structuring too, because in a group like this, you don't necessarily have to have regular meetings when you're willing to say, okay, perhaps we can't meet every week or every month, but we can have a retreat.
Yeah, yeah.
And we can tackle a larger chunk of this during that time. And
Yeah.
then we'll, so I think there's some creative approaches to how you might be able to do that with your time.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Would staff be members of this committee, or is it just from this group?
Well, I think that it has to be a board meeting. group in the beginning with staff as advisory, because
Yeah.
staff can be seen as having either conflict of interest or being put in jeopardy. I think they have the expertise to advise us, though.
That's. I agree with that. Okay, we'll do our best to bring something next month. Continue the discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up is the director's report. Welcome back to work.
Thank you. Yeah, kind of a shorter one this time. I was just getting back when it was due. So went through the ILA recap. And I also had emailed the group about the ICCSD list communication. Not surprisingly, that was emotional for a lot of the library staff. Everybody was abreast of what was going on. We all knew that there was going to be this communication, but really seeing that in our community felt differently than just knowing about it. So we've had quite a bit of staff dialogue about, well, what are we gonna do right now? And the opinions, of course, have ranged, have been all across the spectrum of what's the most appropriate thing. I met with the director of Coralville and North Liberty yesterday to talk about, since we're all serving the school district, the users of the school district, do we want to have a unified response? How do we want to frame it? And we're working through some ideas. We're reaching out to some school library staff to figure out what the most appropriate response would be. Trying to be very mindful of balancing our professional ethics and our collection policies with the reality that we may be in a similar position. I would say as soon as next year. So to really dial up that compassion and make sure that we're focusing on the pieces of librarianship that matter the most here, which is access and intellectual freedom and amplifying our own policies and practices. So we're in conversation, and as I outlined in the email, and did some work sort of checking our holdings against the list. I believe that there'll be more titles added, and we'll keep assessing as that goes through. There has been community interest in the titles, but not overwhelming, right, Anne? So we have gotten a few inquiries around sort of, do you guys have these books? And it's a great opportunity to explain how the catalog works and how our collection policies might differ from academic and school library collections.
I will say that it's going to affect your AIM card access. I can tell you that. That's we have heard that it is not in a violation of 496 for us to teach children how to use the public library access that they get with their student ID number. That is still in compliance. And so many of us who are pretty emotional about this are going to be teaching how to use that card as soon as the new student IDs come out. We generally, most library, I haven't been able to do it but most of us do teach it anyway as part of our catalog. We're being more specific about how to use a catalog and that kind of transferable skill of finding it on the computer and then taking that and finding it on the shelf. And so I'm taking digital information to a physical object. And so a lot of us are looking at that AIM card access. And I have a feeling that if the trend continues, that will be looked at quickly.
Yeah, we're looking.
I think that will be one of the first things.
Earlier about how that would affect.
I have a feeling that will be one of the first things that is under the microscope.
We're looking at the AIM card. We're also looking at the bookmobile stops that are on school property, and making plans for what those responses would look like. I think the biggest pain points, I anticipate those being school personnel at an individual school, interpreting things more conservatively than others.
It's a very broad range across the state right now.
And then what our response will be if the request is, we want to maintain, for instance, bookmobile service, but we need these items off the shelves, or this is, and I think we
Sorry.
want to, this relationship with schools is very important to us, and some of those school stops function as the hub of that part of the community, but we stand very firm in our belief about access and how we build those collections, and would most likely not be in a position to respond, especially to an individual request of, you have to take this off the shelf to come here.
I don't see how you could even,
Begin.
well, because at the point. By making that demand and then acquiescing to that demand, you are stating that whatever comes close to school property automatically belongs to the school. And that's just not how the world works. So, I mean,
I'm just using that as an illustration of what I think will be the difficult piece of this.
I'm sure.
Because I think that there are lots of school staff who are feeling afraid,
Yes,
and
that is.
that's you know, we wanna lead with our compassion, but also keep those professional ethics and standards where they need to be.
Do you? This has come up for me before. Do you put restrictions on, like in my catalog system, I can have a note that pops up anytime a kid checks out, like verify that this child is getting something within their reading level or something like that. Do you guys have that ability to have not necessarily blocks on materials?
And do we
but
want that?
Heads
though?
up, not
I
that
don't
you
think we
even want that.
I don't think we
Because
want that
this is
ability.
all parents' choice, and I have argued and told parents that parents have always had the choice.
Yeah.
Because I can just write a little note saying, my child is not to take home cause.
Well, that's the same,
Junior,"
the
or
parents could
something like
choose
that,
they
and that is
can't-
always there, you know, it's always been an option for parents to make that choice, but this is also at the school. It's
But
not a
likewise, a
public
parent could
library.
say the child's not given permission to get onto the football field. You know, and that allows us to keep materials we want because it retains parents' choice.
Yeah, that's always the,
I would
it's a
not be
sticking point.
offering. I honestly think that these items have come out vague on purpose.
Right.
Mhm.
And so I don't find it necessary for us to fill the line. There is a news item that just came out today. I've not had a chance to read it yet, that some clarification will be coming from the state for school systems.
Someday.
I know apparently,
It's December
Did they give it out
28th.
today?
yeah,
December 28th.
Yeah.
They will be announcing,
They'll
which
be
is
announcing
2
something.
days, 3 days before our deadline.
right. So I
Yeah.
don't, and I don't expect it will clarify any further.
Right.
I believe that it is in the best interest of any organization, and I think some school systems are already gonna be learning this relatively soon. To err on the side of grace and not on the side of blocking, because I really do think the pendulum is gonna swing back and it's gonna be expensive. I think it's gonna be an expensive lesson,
Mhm.
and I just don't find that to be, I mean, if you're just talking strictly from a financial perspective. I don't find it wise to preemptively block, so I would not offer a parent.
I don't think
You
we
know.
would offer, I'm saying if a
Yeah, I
parent
think the
chose to
parent can-
control, I don't think we want to get into the discussion on any level.
No, they would
No.
initiate. It would
But
be
I'm saying, you know, right, if the
if they
parent
would
was somehow having a
initiate.
difficulty, they can actively parent.
And yeah, there's a couple of like sort of logistical answers to that too.
Mm.
Our policies are all built with the assumption of adult involvement with
Right.
youth users. So I would say that we have a lot of examples of involving the adults in these decisions.
Mm.
We can make notes and records. We do not have a practice of using that for restriction, and I don't imagine us doing that. With the exception of the AIM card, which does have restrictions of what collections can be checked out of it on it, ironically enough. Another piece of that is the bulk of our checkouts are done on self-check. So a note, if it wasn't a note that also blocked within the ILS, which would have cataloging implications and
Yes, so different.
many other things. So
My system.
I think it's, I do know that's a practice that some libraries use. I feel confident that our policies again, make our expectations pretty clear around how adults and minors would use the library in its intended way.
I have a question. I'm not sure if anyone here has the answer. I'm just gonna ask it to get it out of my head. When the clarification comes out in December, does that signify a stage gate and opening of litigation on this? Is that where that line is? Because it needs to happen, in my opinion.
Litigation will come.
Litigation is current, I believe that
Is it?
there's active, it's already active, yes.
It's not in Iowa, though.
Not-
The case I know was in Florida or the state.
It's
I
better
believe
terms,
that
right.
there's already.
I thought they were looking for
something
the
in works.
Right.
Until January, even, I mean, but if districts have already pulled
I
materials.
believe
I'm
that there's
telling y'all.
already some feedback.
Yeah,
I don't know how formal it is, but there's absolutely some.
it's a matter of time.
Organized efforts,
And I think that
yeah.
the more information that comes from the state, there might be some clarity in what.
Yeah.
What
And
other
become
steps
more
are
clear
there?
on what constitutional these laws are.
Yes, until there is clarity, like specifically, right?
See, this is
Yes,
why
but-
though we need the advocacy committees, so
Yeah.
that people who really are just
You know,
deep in the trenches here really can educate.
Because they intentionally wrote it really vague.
They did on purpose.
They did on purpose.
Right.
It's harder to form a legal response.
It's photocopy
So-
legislation, so it's, it's not even written really by, and sometimes voted on without being, Anyway,
Mhm.
It's a high draw.
And the only other piece in my report was talking about the union advocating for wage increases. I will keep this group as up to date on that discussion as possible, just as a reminder, the library board does sign the union contract along with the city of Iowa City and obviously Ashley. So I think it's important that this group knows how that's going.
What's the schedule on negotiating that contract?
The next contract would go, their negotiating would start this year or next year, and next year, and the contract would be for the following. And there were scripted increases in the current contract. The current contract was negotiated before some of the changes in inflation and
Right.
other pieces, so that's what the union's asking to reopen that early.
And before we leave the director's report, I'll just congratulate everybody who was involved in ILA. Great to see all of that.
How many, do you know how many sessions there were total? And it seems like a large percentage came from people connected to those libraries, which is cool.
Yeah, I don't know how many there
There
were
is.
total.
seemed like it was.
Yeah,
I mean, 8 sessions is a lot for this library to be.
It's usually about that.
we,
By 12 on Thursday and then.
we have a lot we'd like to say.
Plus it's on the east side of the state. for
Strong
sure.
representation of
affects it.
this library.
And we are one of the
Generally
large
speaking.
libraries.
But when it's on the west side of the state, we don't have that same number.
Hmm.
Seems like it's not lower.
I'll be there.
Let's move on to the Children's Services Department report. Anything you want to add to that? Eugene? No? Any questions?
Congratulations on your award.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Well earned.
We gotta put a chain on that.
Yeah, right? That's awesome. Very handsome. report.
It's a big deal. We're really proud.
It is.
Are you gonna put it on the children's desk to get it fingerprinted?
Yeah.
Because the Daily Iowan came in this week to
Oh,
take
that's
pictures
cool.
and do articles, so there's an article coming out.
But there aren't slimy children's fingerprints all over that. It seems like it's not official.
Yeah, they have it, because they were doing, during my story time, so I had it sitting in the story time. for- This morning, we had about 200 kids, join us
we've always done like a Halloween, like preschool story time. But this year, the entire library went along with my schemes. And, if you know, I mean, a lot of the people sitting over here know Angie's schemes, and I'm just so happy that everyone went along today. And looked and watched, because we had about 200 kids come through in parade. I had, last year, I just had kind of this very sad feeling because, the number one complaint about our library is we don't have a parking lot. And that means that I can't do a trunk or treat event, and we get to go to them and present, but, so we did our own version of trunk or treating with book carts. So, every department decorated a book cart. We're dressed up as Charlie Brown. It's fantastic. The children's staff was, the book Dragons Love Tacos. And had midnight in the library, a cart. Jason's staff did, Clifford. He was a hit. Katie gave out books, which was a hit. Jen dressed up. Where did all the dirt go? Jen was pig pen from, so.
And other city departments too came over.
Yes, the fire.
Oh, nice.
Cool. Public safety, Parks and Rec, and Climate Action, they all joined us this morning. OCAS made a book mobile. So in my report, I talk about our new children's Facebook group. If you go there to that, you can see all the pictures from today. And it was absolutely joyous. So thank you everyone for going along with my schemes.
Questions?
My question is that, no, I don't know about for some reason. Oh, I didn't give you another. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to trunk or treat tonight, so with my mom.
So our next report is the Collection Services Department report. Highlight on Digital Johnson County. Thank you. Ann, anything to add or any questions for Ann?
We're gonna meet as an entity sometime next month to discuss, future questions, but also what happens if we do get a reposter and request for digital materials. You know, we have 3 different libraries. 3 different
Right.
policies. So we kind of gotta get that under control.
And our next report is from IT department. New gates and good interns. Any questions?
Like seeing the varied product and projects that
Yeah.
interns do.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And that brings us to the development department. Being the time of change.
Yes.
Yeah. Congratulations to Peter. So, a great job he's going to.
Yeah.
Another great job. Yeah. And. Any questions or anything you wanted to add, Katie?
I don't think I have anything to add. We're excited to, start the hiring process and, have some good applicants, so.
Where the t-shirt drives going, and I have just gotten my t-shirt thanks to you, but how's the round 2 of the t-shirts going?
Yeah, the Ray-Ban sales have been good. I think, that right on the heels of the very successful Take a Look sales. Maybe there was just a little bit less excitement, but the nice thing about the Ray-Ban store is it just stays open. So there's not a time frame on it, so you can push it at any point or add products to it at any time. There have been things that the public has requested that they'd like to see in there, so whatever's in their normal stock, we can add to the store without incurring an expense because they can print on demand, so yeah. So we'll kind of see how that goes into the future. It's nice to just have that out there and not have to handle it ourselves.
Yeah, that's perfect. Unless there are any comments on the news articles that were included, move on to the president's report. Of which I have none. And are there any announcements from members? Any committees that have a report to make? We saw the communications. So that brings us to the consent agenda. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of the minutes approval and disbursements approval. Moved by DJ. Seconded by Robin. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So. Agenda for our next meeting. Let's see, November. Remember, November and December, we meet on a different Thursday than all other months. And we'll do theft, defacement, and alteration. Wow, can't wait.
You have some frustration you want to get out?
Yeah, right. And remember, it's always a good idea to be looking out to January, which will be the public relations policy, and see if there's anything you want to put into the front end of the reconsideration of that policy.
I can just remind everybody that we need to take a picture out.
Yeah, yeah, run off.
That's for me, wasn't
I never come prepared.
I have a Charlie Brown costume if you want.
I have a dragon pup. My second picture day this week, not prepared for either one.
So having completed the business on the agenda, I adjourn the meeting and we'll have a picture taken. Jenny, you want to do it on the stairs?